Guys, before starting the video, I want to ask for your subscription and your like because this video was a lot of work and I know you liked the video because I did this and I brought another 1.5 hours for you. So, whoever is new to the channel can watch it all as the video is very good and this work is very good, seriously. Once upon a time, there was a prince who had his mother and his brother until a vampire appears and ends up killing her. But both of them survive, their children. But he ends up being exiled because he did a lot of shit. Then he tried to kill himself. But then our prota enters the scene. He was reincarnated in the body of this shitty prince, exiled and hated by everyone. But it's one thing to do ours for a long time strength, which was necromancy along with another magic that you will see later, and that made him very overpowered. And this is the story of our little champion who gets stronger over time and has his Charlotte which helps him a lot. So that's it guys, enjoy the video and it's us. A man ends up opening the door for him, commented that he was there, and he told that guy in front of him that that place was no longer safe and they needed to get away as quickly as possible. But the old man asked who this guy was, and the guy, trembling with fear, asked if he hadn't heard the rumors on the street. That guy was a lichen killer, vampire killer, the master of the blue demons, and he was heading towards them with his army of the dead alive. He commented that he would not let the Dark Order escape. He would kill everyone there as cruelly as possible. But that guy was smiling and unconcerned, asking why they should worry. They had the best order of the holy knights and were with them. But then the guy starts putting his hand on his head, shaking with fear, collapsing, saying no. The knights he was talking about were turned into undead and were going along with the army towards them. And the protagonist gives a simple order to his army, which was to go and move forward, entering that place. Many of them start marching in that direction, trying to break the windows, while the two inside saw only the shadow of their hands on the windows. It is obvious that the glass did not hold on and ended up breaking while the two, in despair, were attacked ferociously by those creatures. While they shouted for help, how could it be possible? In theory, the living dead should serve them, the necromancers, but that wasn't what was happening. That guy said that it didn't matter how much effort he made to stop them. God would save them, and he would guarantee their salvation. But the prota points a gun at him, saying he would do it for him, and that guy knew he couldn't beat him. Even the divine power that was coursing through his body was not enough. The prota said that God's blessing would take him to hell and ends up taking that guy's head. The scene cuts to a palace, and there were rumors about the seventh prince, the one who was exiled. He is a disgrace to the Holy Emperor's kingdom. How could a human like that be born in the kingdom ruled by the Holy Emperor? Isn't he the lowest type of humanity, with no morals, with nothing? There were even rumors about the prince harassing a bishop's daughter, and they commented that it would be better if he had just accepted the punishment. But he made a mess in the archbishop's room and ended up painting the wall with red paint. It was written "Slave of Gaia" on the wall. They commented that that made the Holy Emperor go crazy and become very furious. He even sent the prince to the land of the living dead as punishment. He sent him there so that he could reflect on his actions. But it wasn't quite like that. He ended up doing some bad things and even tried to commit suicide, even more after being rejected by a girl. But luckily, he managed to survive. The guy is so that he failed to take his own life. But there were also rumors that after this incident, it was strange, but he became a completely different person. He worked hard at the monastery without getting into trouble. Everyone in the city was obsessed with him. Obviously, there are people who are suspicious of this strange attitude. Because he would have suddenly changed out of nowhere, as if it were another person. It was really strange. There were rumors that a demon entered his body because he committed blasphemy. The prince made a contract with the devil, maybe. Also, another rumor was that there was a body walking around the monastery and going on. There were a lot of rumors of all kinds. The scene ends up cutting while Prota asked what they thought because he wanted an honest opinion. He was a living dead man. He kept looking at Prota, and I think he couldn't speak. Prota was a necromancer, Alan Alfuse, 16 years old, the seventh exiled prince, and Proda ends up closing the system window, wondering why it appears all over time. He believed that the rumors arose because some people saw him walking with those two. Oh, if he continued like this, he would be accused of being an R, and what he should do isn't even actually. He explains that he doesn't even it was this Alan Alfuse. He was an ordinary person from Korea, but randomly he became the son of the Holy Emperor's trash. And it entered his body when he was hanging from a rope, and he said that thank God the rope had broken, didn't it? Because otherwise, he would die a second time. He even managed to see a status window. He could see that that was Zombie 768, and on the side, right, was the Zombie 769. He opened his arms, saying he had a necromancer skill, and he used to work as a cemetery guardian. This made him have an image of an arid, unfortunately, but he was quite confused and started to understand the situation. But he thought he would have to stop doing that because otherwise, he would to make matters worse. He explained that they really worked well together. The zombie would dig the grave, then the zombie would bury the other zombie. And after that, the grave was made. All you had to do was put a tombstone in the grave with the name of the deceased. He said that person was a beautiful day while the zombies were happy too. But he said maybe it's a good time to say goodbye, and the zombie is in shock, wondering why. They start to make almost a protest there against the Proda while he was telling them to calm down. He even commented that one of them seemed to be quite angry until he was drooling. He was trying to say that this is his first life, and it was complicated, but he would explain the rest later as he was just trying to have a peaceful second life. And he would think more about it while he approached those three zombies, and he asked if the zombies agreed. And then they ended up pointing the finger, saying yes, and so they start working. Two guys appear nearby, asking if the other one on their side had heard that. But the one who was loading the cart told him to speak quietly and pull quickly. He asked if he wanted to die like those two who were being pulled. They just had to hurry and go to the prince for him to take care of the rest. Furthermore, it was also supposed to ask him to help that cursed king, and a scene from a red eye ends up appearing that looks like the eye of Sakura Gojo. That incredible persona cuts to a fierce fight of a bear against the living dead. They bit the bear's skin mercilessly while the bear was furious. Obviously, he was being eaten alive. He ended up attacking one of the two zombies, which ends up being thrown away towards the wall, but other hands end up appearing from the ground, catching the zombie, and the Proda even commented that that bear killed several people. Luckily, he was able to summon many zombies to resist that bear. It was definitely much larger than those of his zombies. But in the end, the quantity was almost gaining strength, and that bear really was all finished. He gets close to Proda, trying to bite him, but it was already over for him. Proda gives his final blow with a knife to his head, and one of the girls who were on Proda's side, who we didn't know yet, was just looking at the situation. He commented that the result of the fight was obvious, and the girl ends up calling the girl a prince, and asking if he was okay because she would help him. He said he was fine, but he just used a lot of divine power, and that's why he was exhausted. Besides, he wondered in his thoughts why she was there. Maybe if she was there to hit him. He also said for her to call her Charlotte, which seems like he showed all his power. He commented that he wanted to live a life in peace as an exile, so it would be quite nice if she could hide her power and not speak to anybody. But that was just Charlotte's point of view. While she said prince, the real Beyond was there, almost dead, ugly, very ugly animal. He starts to think that she would no longer bother her, and that's why it was to leave him alone too. She commented that he was her savior, so she would listen to any of his wishes. He asks, "What do you mean, Salvador? I don't understand," and obviously, he asks why she thought that, but he's interrupted at the time. Someone ends up arriving, calling the prince to Charlotte. They asked why the two were there in that tunnel. Furthermore, he asked if the prince was okay because they even brought the equipment to explore that cave, and soon they start to slowly go down. He starts to think that he was fine just to go back there up. He was already aware of that situation. Furthermore, that extra asked who had summoned those zombies to go after that bear. They even asked if it was the two of them who did it because it was a bear known as the King of Gluttony. Not even they knew how many people he had hurt until that moment. He said he thought there was a necromancer in that cave. He even tried to turn the cave into his base and killed that Euro that was already there. Both the Russians and the zombies were dead when they arrived, and the extras started saying that it made sense because necromancers were also scary. Proto commented in his mind that regardless of what the woman called Morian was probably already dead. The necromancer tried to lure them to the trap using it to kill people with the bear, and the guy asks what they were going to do at that moment. While the PR said that they just had to go deeper into the cave, it was obvious that those extras were scared and reluctantly asking if he was really sure. But he said yes, he needed to see how good that necromancer was, and they said that then they would leave right there. The scene cuts to a cave. There was even water running, a source of water, and they were behind a stone, a rock, until the guy tells the prince to look in that direction. He commented that it was Morian, and she was tied by a rope and full of drawings. They start to go after her, saying that they had arrived to save her, but Silver doesn't let his guard down. He is surprised that she is alive. The necromancer used her as bait. That's a fact, but it would just be easier to kill her and take care of her body. He wonders if it's that woman. He comments that it was just a maybe. And then Morian realizes that the prince was there. She is grateful that everyone was there trying to save her. But then Proto ends up attacking that girl with a blow to her head. She actually takes such a hit that even the extras are in shock. They are even scared of the prince, asking if he was okay. But the PR was cold, saying that he should have hit with a sharper edge and apologizes for making a mistake. They ask if Morian was okay, while the other asked what was wrong with the prince. But the PR said that he could see everything that way. Morgana was 63 years old. Her specialty was honey trap, necromancy, dissection, curse, and murder. She is extremely nervous and agitated. He begins to think that Moriana was not the bait, and the girl starts calling the prince. She said there must be a misunderstanding, but Proto said he wouldn't listen to her anymore and told PR that the others shouldn't fall for her talk. He said that she was a necromancer while she asked, what was that impossible? And Proto said that everything from the name to the age was a lie. But then she starts to think that this shouldn't be happening, and she starts screaming that the necromancer dragged her there. He even tortured her, but he was like, yes, I'm connected. He asks her if she really thought these people would believe her just because she acted so kindly. He asked her to drink that holy water since she wasn't that necromancer. And if she was a necromancer, her organs would melt, but that's the best medicine for humans. Even their wounds would heal instantly, and she said he wouldn't need to give something so precious to her, while he said yes, it was really necessary. He ends up asking her to drink, almost threatening her with that psychopathic look of his. It was obvious that she shits her pants, asking how he had discovered this rudeness of hers. No one really suspected while he acted like Morian in the village for a whole year. So how did that damn prince discover her so easily? What kind of power did he have? He had it there to ask if she really wasn't going to drink it, right? The prince was giving it to her, so she should be taking orders. While she said that anyway, then her aura changes and becomes red. She was going to get rid of him during the death wave anyway, and she ends up throwing something in his hand, and that holy water ends up falling on the floor. She commented that he just accelerated his death by calling him a prince and ends up turning into an ugly old woman. She said she tried to keep him alive longer, but he failed, and at that moment, he would die. He ends up taking a step back, head of the poor skeleton, and he asked how dare she act so arrogantly in front of him. It was for her to retreat while he was being nice and ends up swearing at her. She wonders what he was doing, very strange, and someone appears behind her back. It was Charlotte. She ends up knocking the witch over, the PR holding the hostage skeleton. Poor guy. He said, "Good job, Charlotte," while the witch didn't understand anything. She asked what he had done with her skeletons. She even thought his shovel was a source of his strength. He said that was it. The shovels have been amazing lately. But then the witch said it couldn't be a normal shovel. It should be a holy relic. The PR asked if she was serious, even if she was worried about that instead of being worried about herself. She had a knife to her neck from Charlotte after she was beaten. She explained that her name was Morgana, a 63-year-old necromancer, and she had already been arrested again. To ask if she wouldn't confess anything while the extras were shocked and scared, she said she would tell everything, even who ordered her to murder the prince, so it wasn't supposed to kill her. And then the black man asked if she was saying that someone told her to kill him. She said yes, they asked her to seduce him and even fake his death to make it look like it was a suicide. And then the guy starts to think that the prince didn't commit suicide but was forced to do it. Then Proto starts thinking, oh, this guy wasn't so pathetic since he also didn't try to kill himself. The witch starts asking in her mind why he was so strange and indifferent about the matter, as if she didn't care. She explained that the Dark Church told her to kill the 7th grandson of the Holy Emperor, and she saw through the bear that he is also a necromancer. If the church finds out about this, they won't leave him alone for a long time. Then Para is surprised that she discovered this too, but he said that anyway, he thought they should kill her. So he asked Charlotte what she thought, while she said with the knife to the witch's neck that yes, she is very scared, telling him to wait because this was just a slip-up, and she would 100% keep the secret. She wouldn't tell the Dark Church anything, so please let her live. But he slaps her in the face, saying that if she told everything like that easily, then it wouldn't be worth anything. With pressure from the church, she would tell everything about him. And he said that only the villagers would decide her fate, because there are a lot of people who lost their families because of it, right? The villagers were furious with her. Pra simply says that she should pay for her sins. As she speaks to him, wait, please, she didn't really want to die. The black girl asks the extras what they would do with her, because she must receive the punishment equivalent to the crime she committed. They said they would give her a painful death and then leave her in the forest. Then the animals would eat her corpse, and only she would be left to become a zombie. This is not a befitting ending for the necromancer. Did he insult death or say he agreed and spoke? It was expected from the Middle Ages. In fact, don't forget that he was in Korea and was reincarnated in the protagonist's body, which in this case is him now. He starts to look up, thinking he was thinking about this so-called Dark Church. After he had researched some books, he commented that he couldn't find out everything, but was able to steal the books from that necromancer who helped a lot and had stored everything in his inventory. As a necromancer, it would be great if he could talk to the spirits, but he really thought he wouldn't be able to get this ability in that place. So he starts to investigate other books from there. And now that he was thinking about it, that woman said something about the death wave or something. So he would need to read more about this death wave again. As for his brothers, maybe they have something behind it. And anyway, he was already a prince. They must have been trying to get rid of him because of the battle of succession. It was obvious that this was a power struggle. It was very complicated, and he said that this was the royal family. This royal family he read in books. He really didn't want to be murdered by anyone. Maybe he should hire some mercenaries. But he said that for now, he should improve his proficiency and skills, and there was someone after him. This was Charlotte. She was thinking that the prince would probably be murdered. She commented in her thoughts that everyone said that His Highness had changed a lot. He was similar to her in size, but he always took the initiative in the fight. He saved several people alone in this incident. He took care of the funerals of those who died. Furthermore, she remembers a conversation she had with a man. He told Charlotte that while she was recovering, the prince also took care of the bodies of her parents, and she starts crying. She bangs her fist on the table, saying he saved her parents, and she also wanted to thank her. But nothing she did was enough yet, and there is a lot of danger lurking for the prince. She needed to be a shield to protect him, and she looks at a book and said that in this case, to protect the prince, she would have to become even stronger. She was quite determined while the proto-window was blowing. This was the magnificent prince. How incredible, huh, friends? The scene cuts, and the book shows that the living dead evolve over time. When the zombies' bodies decompose, they become skeletons, but if they are able to keep their bodies intact, they would evolve into a stronger version, which is called from Gaul E from Gaul to do LH, and from D Lamb to Vampiro. The more they evolve, the more intelligent and powerful they become. When the zombie is in the dark, the mana contained in the darkness makes them evolve faster, and that's why these things always want stronger and stronger mana. Thus the fate of all zombies is called the land of dead spirits. To prevent their flesh from deteriorating and rotting even more with hot weather, they leave for cold and dark lands. When autumn ends and winter arrives, the cold period is when their instincts to find the land of dead spirits are at their peak, and it is called the death wave. On December 25th, the coldest day during the period of the wave of death, the day on which the land of the king of the dead Ammon died, is the day on which the greatest number of living dead seek the land of dead spirits to recover their lives. But he closed the book and spoke that there is more or less a month left until the wave of death. He commented in his thoughts that that witch was planning to use the zombies to kill him, but someone appears and calls him. Charlotte said she would help him keep that book if he gives her the book. He said everything was fine and ends up handing it to her while she leaves, and he even commented that he didn't ask her for anything. But she still continued going to church there every saint day to help him. In addition to organizing the books, she even does the cleaning, organizes the cemetery, and prepares meals free of charge, and he wonders if he could really accept all of this. He simply comes to the conclusion that she would simply leave when she got tired, and from what he heard, it seems that the Grill accepted her as his adoptive daughter. So she has a home to return to, and he said that that guy, even though he seems loose, was still a nice guy, but it ends up sounding like the sound of a door opening, and there were 3 knights watching the guy until it was shining green. It was probably someone important. The duck is even surprised and wonders what was going on there. He saw that that guy's name was Harmond, 33 years old, Vice Commander of the Knights of the Holy Cross fencing Sacred Family Protection of Ha. He commented to Proda that he found out that he captured the witch Morgana, and Proda becomes suspicious, thinking that he got straight to the point without even greeting himself. He was treating him as if he were an exiled prince. It's not even the case for coming to the conclusion that considering he already heard the news, it must be those guys who were watching him. Proda said that was exactly what he captured with the help from the lions and asked why. His question was if he had a problem with this or something like that. He said that they were just there to confirm the facts, but it seemed to be true, even though he said that Proda fought incessantly with the villagers. While Proda only confirmed, that guy continues saying that he even killed the king of predators with an agricultural tool, and the guy is like, what? The guy goes on to say that while a person named Grill killed 30 zombies and cornered the witch with holy water, the Proda has even more doubts while Charlotte is surprised, lost in the world of her thoughts. The guy said that that farmer told him, and the Proda starts to think that it wasn't even 5 minutes ago that he praised him, saying he was a cool guy, and now he was lying so blatantly. The knight said that he honestly thought it was an exaggeration, but after seeing the remains of a fierce battle, he really thought that everything he said was true. Silver only thought that if he was really a holy knight, he shouldn't be naive like that. The knight asks if Proda knew that Morgana belonged to the Dark Church. He answers yes because she said so herself. She was saying this as if it were some kind of secret, but it seemed like a public fact. The guy was saying yes because they are a perverse organization. Morgana managed to devastate 5 villages alone, and to begin with, he said that he was joking without even knowing it. The guy asks if he really eliminated that witch completely and asked if he hadn't heard. She was already beaten to death. Her body was left lying around. Then the guy asks who did this, but Proda said he didn't know what kind of strength he would have to do it, and he had his hand in his pocket, thinking it was of course true that he judged her. But there's nothing advantageous in revealing their true power. It is true that the villagers also helped, so they would continue with Grill's bluff. Then he started talking. Just being home made him so scared that he almost pissed his pants. Charlotte eats it and holds him by the arm, and the guy looks disgusted, just thinking about it. The knight said that he must not be aware of the witch's magic books, and the guy asks what these books are, commented that they should recover the black magic books. But for some reason, the book moments were empty, and Proto looked sleepy while the culprit was him who kept the books in his inventory. Proto explains that the villagers should have burned him for being so sinister, and the Holy Knight could ask them again. The guy says that he was grateful for his collaboration, and last but not least, he leaves a bag of money there, the reward for Morgana of 80 gold coins. Proto is in shock because that was a lot. The guy kept saying that she had a nice bounty on her head, and Proto said that he just did that because he had to do it. And when he started taking the money, the guy said he should at least distribute it among the villagers, not keep everything alone, right? And Proto said that of course he would do that. The guy was already suspicious because Proto was kissing that bag of money. He said that since he finished the work there, he asked, "Excuse me," because he was going to go out, calling Proto di Altezza. The guy says to the Proto packs his luggage, and Proto doesn't know why he was already exiled. He would be exiled again. The guy said that the wave of death was already closed, isn't it? If they stayed there, they would die, and that's why they would climb him out of there. Proto starts to think that they still care about him, even though he is a prince exiled. But anyway, he was still a prince, and he starts saying that if they were being evacuated, he would be sent back to the royal palace. But the guy said no, he would follow them to the property Lonia. Proto looked surprised. Proto said it was half a day's journey from there, and they still were in the land of dead spirits. He was very doubtful whether it made sense to evacuate there, while the guy said that yes, there is the property of Lonia. It is a fortress built to stop the wave of death, and to be able to fight against the zombies in the wave of death. They gathered soldiers and prisoners. And then the Silver speaks. Don't tell me who is the guy. He said that yes, there would be victims. Certainly, he was supposed to take care of the funerals on the Lonia estate. And then the beginning begins. Imagine how many undead he would get. The scene ends up cutting, and the guy in front of the car was called Gennard. He was 43 years old. He was the feudal lord of Alonia, a viscount. The characteristic that he had was comforting communication and merciful. He asked with his face smiling how he was feeling. He even called him Highness. Proto was all finished, saying that everything was not going well. The guy was even curious about why. If his journey there was difficult, or the Proto explained that the carriage was not comfortable to ride in, while the Proto was thinking that until they were treating him very well for an exiled guy, while the Viscount asked who those guys were there. And the guy with red hair simply says that he was someone incredible, while Charlotte responds that he was just a servant. The boss asked for they stopped talking and took him to his room, while the Viscount said that he would take him. Proto had a simple question why he had to go there. The land of dead spirits, land of Lonia, nicknamed the Fortress of Sacrifice, was a place that was called yes, because the victims relieved the anger of the living dead who gathered there. To wall of the castle that surrounded this entire land is just to block the wave of death. Furthermore, they should resist for a month against the zombies. And after that, the Proto begins to see all the prisoners who would fight on the front line. That knight warned that Proto could help them by healing the wounded and helping him with funerals and prayers. He said he thought it would be easy to help, but then there was one detail. The knight said there were more or less 2,000 to 3,000 casualties a year, and the Proto is frozen while the guy asked if he would want help from someone because he was alone. He also commented that he was at least 80 priests who could perform the purification ritual, and the soldiers would help him with the funeral, so it was not for him to worry. Besides, sometimes there are men who die of exhaustion from working too much, but it will be calm according to him. Proto ends up calling the feudal lord. He asked drinks because he wanted drinks, and the guy doesn't understand very well. So Proto said he couldn't handle that guy's situation without any drinks. At that moment, he would rather die from so many babies than die from working that way. Proda would tell Charlotte and con grill and have fun too, while she said she had understood, and the para, taking a bottle of wine, told her to come back before the wave of death started, and the two said what who had understood. Pra also warned him that they both had to protect him, and he ends up leaving, saying he wanted to rest a little. Charlotte starts to think for him to just trust her, but then the warrior was too thinking something else. He said mature his ass, and on the other side of the door, the Proda said that the performance was very good. Of course, he wouldn't drink that. He ends up scratching the bottle, and one energy ends up appearing. He commented that he would have to at least keep some sacred drinks to survive all that fight, and it's better to fill all the bottles with holy water and consider it as if it were his energy or something like that. If he continued pouring his energy into water like that, it could serve as a kind of training to control his power, but he notices something there. He says that is very interesting. There was a weapon at that time. He starts to pick it up carefully, saying that he already saw in a book that there really are weapons in that world, but he didn't know it was so common. So he said that the reason why people prefer guns, white weapons in that world full of monsters, is because in that world normal weapons are just for show. To be more exact, when you shoot with this weapon, you use mana instead of gunpowder, and they could use it by pouring mana or sacred power, but it consumes an absurd amount of mana. That's why people end up fainting after shooting about 5 times, and it takes 5 minutes to manifest a bullet with mana. That's why people liked guns more white, and he commented that in movies, they kill a zombie with a shot to the head, and he wonders if it was like that the way he created the magic bullet and then just shot the zombie, and bang, he shoots a very powerful bullet. As the system window appears, saying that he has successfully manifested the holy power bullet, he is fascinated with that power of that weapon. He made a huge hole in the wall while another system window appeared, saying that was activating the divine energy, and he starts to think that he got really screwed. Everyone starts shouting what the noise was. They were worried, and after a while, that guardian, that night, had a frown while out the guards who were around him said that the vice commander didn't seem to be in a very good mood. They said he should be focused on the coming wave of death, and he thought it would be that, or perhaps even because of the 7th prince. But before he finishes speaking, the vice commander ends up calling the attention from the two, saying that he didn't want to warn them to keep their eyes on the prisoners instead of keeping their eyes open. Sharp conversation. The guy gets very scared and ends up leaving the place to look at the prisoners. The vice commander said that they really weren't completely wrong. He said that it was the 7th prince's fault. He heard a very loud noise last night. He remembers Proda telling him not to peep into the room's sensitive teenager, and he was invading his privacy. He starts to think that privacy was his ass. He was all nervous. He started walking to the side, saying that that guy was sure he broke something, and he starts to think that the imbecile is always an imbecile. But before he continues with his thoughts, someone interrupts him. The villager said that he changed a lot after the suicide incident, almost as if he had lost his memory. He even completed his duties at the cemetery. He even volunteered Ava in the fight against the group of zombies. He saved the village, and the vice commander starts to think that the villagers said so many good and meaningless things that was total nonsense. He should have subordinated the ease he can only, and he begins to imagine the scene of Proda mistreating them with a staff, saying that it was better for them to respond properly to the holy knights when they arrive. He puts his hand on his chin and starts thinking like that. Man, subduing a Morgana-level necromancer was impossible. It looks like that guy called Grill is pretty strong, can only be done, and he said that the misunderstanding was only getting worse, and he had better write a letter of recommendation for him so he can take an exam and become a holy knight. Take advantage of the opportunity, right? But then he notices something hiding behind the wall, saying that the prisoners were fighting again. He starts arriving, fighting, asking what he was doing before the battle. But he ends up being surprised by what he had seen. Who was there on top of the guy holding a pear as a weapon was Proda, asking if he didn't know who he was. He was apparently very nervous, very angry about the situation that had happened. One day it ended up passing after arriving at the Lonia property. People began to die from the epidemic and the excess work, and the PR was there in that place, digging several holes. He now found out in the best way why they had taken such good care of him. It was obvious that he was supposed to work until fainting. He was wearing a bird's beak mask. The system said it was a purification spell that was applied to her to prevent contamination, and he begins to wonder when the zombies would appear, but he hears a scream in the background. He ends up looking in the direction that guy was asking why he had just raised his head. He calls Proda and asks if he didn't want to rest a little there. That was Rise Count Edrin's eldest son, commented that looking at him, you can seeing that he was just a student at the academy. And Silver asks which academy my friend was thinking he went to there to serve as part of the disciplinary action. They start to make fun while the Proda looks stupid. They commented that children from good families could be easily dismissed, and it was obvious that he was just a country bumpkin from the outskirts. It's not really the extras. They don't waste time anymore and start drooling over that guy's egg over there, the Count's son, saying that if he wanted to have a peaceful life, he should listen to that guy. And the blonde said that if he didn't have looking for a maid, he wouldn't even have gone to that trash town. But then he ends up looking at one who was right away, the Charlotte. He said she would serve him well. He asked if he was referring to Charlotte, and then that guy asked if she was his maid. He started bragging that one day he got his hands on a girl from the academy who was as beautiful as her, and he started screaming, saying he would take care of her. But she ran away in fear and even forced him to raise his hands against her. Then Proda started to think that that guy was really disgusting. He was petty. Proda just turned his back, imagining that he would rather dig that ground there than talk to those disgusting guys. Then the blonde asked if he was already leaving because he didn't even let him. He also ended up calling that maid Charlotte. He asked if he had called her, and he said yes. While Proda observed the situation, he was already a little more serious. That guy grabbed Charlotte's arm. She didn't understand anything, and even the thing she was carrying fell down. He asked her to listen to him play elsewhere with her master, but she said she was very busy at that moment. That guy started saying that she didn't understand what was happening, and that it was something simple to play with a peasant like her. But before he continued talking, she squeezed his fist, and he finished screaming in so much pain. Proda said that she could take care of herself on her own. She almost broke his arm. The guy started crying, calling her monstrous. He commented that they were just stupid and had nothing, as well as strength since they lived in those remote areas. But he said it was enough. The guy continued saying he still couldn't believe how her parents managed to pass that monstrous blood to a girl like that. He said it really suited her considering half the people in the land of the living dead turn into zombies, and her whole family would soon become a bunch of zombies. At that moment, Proda raised his shovel and ended up hitting it so hard on the ground that the guy was in shock. He asked what Proda was doing, even though he was shaking with fear. Proda explained that he made a mistake while trying to dig a grave. The annoying blonde asked how Proda would be able to call this a mistake. But before he continued talking, Proda punched him in the face and said that this time his hand slipped. The guys were already shocked by a guy lying on the floor, calling him Senhor Rise. The blonde ended up being stepped on by Proda and asked if he knew who he was, but then Proda responded with another question and asked if he knew who he was. At that moment, the warrior arrived, asking them both to stop. He told the silver man that he would cause another problem again, and the extra getting beaten was all relieved, saying he was a sacred knight. The lily began to say that the crazy guy hit him and was to punish him immediately, while Charlotte said that's not how it happened. The guy started saying, "Oh, I'm Rise, the eldest son of the Count of Edrin." The holy knight said that he just couldn't ignore that, but he was already nervous about the whole situation. He said, "Silence," and everything stopped. Everyone was in shock, paralyzed. The holy knight didn't understand why he couldn't move. Even in his voice he wanted to leave. He wondered if that was an incantation using the sacred power to start talking to Harmon to tell that insolent margin insect who he was. They stood still for a while until the knight started to say that that was Alan, the grandson of the Holy Emperor, the seventh prince. The guy got all scared on the floor. Silver asked if he now understood whose maid he was rude to, and who he failed to show respect to. The guy was shaking. He couldn't even get up. The guy said there was no reason for him to be scared. If he could apologize honestly, there would be no problems. After that, Proda was stuck in prison. Proda said he just had a little problem, while Charlotte said that according to the Lord Holy Knight, the wounds inflicted on the son of a noble could not be forgiven. He fainted and was carried after that. Charlotte apologized because Proda had a very difficult week, and Proda said that he was the grandson of a noble emperor. He was being arrested. Everything happened because of that rude guy. He even said that he shouldn't worry. He could kill some time with a book or something. He ended up looking up and said that it was much better than at least digging outside. The scene cut to the Holy Knight. The man ended up arriving, calling the vice commander. He commented that he ordered the prisoners to clear the snow. Anyway, it was snowing so much that they were not managing to clean up quickly enough. The vice commander was thinking about something else. It was Proda, thinking that he could use the sacred enchantment. Isn't it the seventh prince? He said that no one knew he used an incantation, and even though he is a zero, the blood of the Holy Emperor still runs strong in his veins. That must be why he was able to use such power. But the guy called the vice commander again because he was in the moon world. He said yes, they had to keep removing the snow from the castle wall to remain at the ideal height. He ended up looking down, saying that it was so cold, but there were few zombies. That soldier told him that the sacred emperor killed the spirit of the living Moros on December 25th, and he asked if they should report this to the Holy Emperor's family. The vice commander said that would be good and asked him to gather all the prisoners. They would need some time to regroup. The gate opened, and the ground showed only footprints and even blood. The living dead began their attack. They shouted to close the gate, and they were all badly injured on the ground. They commanded the priests to take care of the injured. One of them said that the zombie attacked him from behind, and because of that dense blizzard, they couldn't tell who was hiding behind them. Those who remained at the rear were all eaten, and the guy even cried with terror. The vice commander started to think about why he was thinking he was so quiet. Was that why the day when the king of dead spirits Ammon was killed was coming? There was no way zombies could come there. Soon there would be two. There wouldn't have been 3,000 dead more or less unless it was a war. He wondered how that happened, not even thinking that the zombies attacked him from behind. It's possible they were hiding under the snow too. He even said in his thoughts that the living dead are dead people. Obviously, they don't recognize fear and depend on their instincts, as they are definitely not unequipped. They do not know any strategy or tactics, and they were even able to increase their large numbers every year. There's something strange. It was different now. He said that this was a perfectly coordinated army, and he commented that this has never happened before. He wondered what was happening. Then someone shouted, "Wait, there's a living dead man talking." The guy kept telling them to be afraid, jealous, and long for death. He also began to say that it was natural that they were just scared. He was the judge of that world, the Messiah who would save the world through death. He was the Su of Udai, the god of death. The Ava system showed that this was the vampire count. He had the ability to bite, mana discharge, necromancy, and arrogance. Proda closed his book, commenting that it was quite brattle there. Outside, they were just taking a while to bring the food too. He started to look at the window and wondered how they were able to let a prince starve to death. But someone ended up calling him. He said he wasn't trying to escape from prison, but the guy told him to just get out of the window. Proda said that he was still on parole, while the count said that was not the problem. There is a legion of undead outside. Proda wondered if it was because there weren't enough workers, but he said it really wasn't that. There really is a legion. Even a vampire brought a legion of undead. Silver was surprised to hear this. He even asked if the guy didn't see it wrong. Why would there be a monster of such a level in that place? The Count said that he clearly used human language since he was controlling other monsters. It was definitely a vampire. He didn't really know what had happened either, but for now, it was for them to get out of there. Even Lord Holy Knight Ramon was confronting them. He ended up opening Prota's cage and said that this place would probably collapse, so he should be evacuated to a safe place. The Count said that evacuating would hear Prota, but a noise was heard. Prota even asked what type of noise that was. It must be the legion of monsters. They must evacuate faster than they imagined, and it had to be through the back gate. The guy was just listening to that noise while several dead alive ended up entering prison simply out of nowhere. The prisoner wondered what was happening. A pile of zombies was not normal. This was very crazy. He gathered a bunch of zombies and threw the living dead at them, faced him on his territory, and he started to think that they were being attacked like that. Out there, Dev should be filled with these things also to close that prison by calling the feudal lord was to come to reel and command his soldiers. If those residents were being hunted like that, there would only be more living dead to kill. They fought, and the guy started running, saying he would find somewhere for the residents to take refuge, while Prota was wondering what he was going to do in this situation. They were able to take care of everything until that moment, but that's because they were at a level that he could handle. But he was completely outnumbered this time, and in a situation like this, he had no choice but to run. He ended up using a shiny skill, and kind of like a liquid apparently ran between the zombies, and then they were all on the ground. He said that he would use this chance to go out quickly, and he began to observe the situation, already panting from tiredness. It was total zombie chaos everywhere, biting everyone while the victims were asking for help. A guy started shouting that he had nowhere to run while the soldiers were telling him to retreat immediately. They would push them away with their shields, but then they would realize there were zombies coming from behind too. In this case, Prota was stopped. He really didn't know what to do, even though he didn't know how much time he would last with the holy water that he has made so far. He would never be able to fight against all those zombies. He raised his shovel, saying that it wasn't what he wanted, and commented that it looked like the goddess Gaia was angry because she can't control him. He ended up slamming the shovel on the floor. A system window appeared and said that the blessing was beginning in a large area. A strong energy with holy water ended up around Prota as if it was a water hurricane and ended up raining holy water everywhere. This was the deliberate plague. That rain was all over the place, hitting all the zombies that even burned because it was holy water. They obviously started to scream. It was a deafening noise. People started to see that the zombies were melting in the rain, but then one of them ended up realizing that his wounds were also healing. They started to say that it was holy water and not normal rain. But what do you mean, holy water was falling from the sky? They started to think that it should only be a blessing from the goddess Gaia. But one of them realized that it wasn't Gaia who was doing this. It was Her Highness. A woman, there is no doubt. Then he told her to look there. The holy water was surrounding His Highness. Prota was doing his best. He was already quite tired too. People started to wonder if he could really use a sacred power that way. They said that he was already expected to be an exiled prince. After all, he was the grandson of a hero who stopped the king of dead spirits by hand 50 years ago and was the Holy Emperor. Celtic Addis, what a difficult name, young man. The warriors start to wonder if there were any residents who needed help. The feudal lord opened the gate of the mansion, and he would guide everyone inside. It's obvious that the entire population is very happy with this, and they start to run. The woman, holding her son, said they were alive. They made it, and they started to thank Prota too. He was all pale and tired. He said it was clear even though he made it rain inside the castle. He was very exhausted, and he realized that at least the soldiers were still okay. So he called those two, saying they were going to go with him to help the holy knights who were outside. Obviously, they were in shock because they would die if they were. They didn't even have weapons for this type of situation. He explained to Prota that the living dead could not be defeated by the weapons of ordinary people like them. Proda pointed down, saying that is why he gave her a blessing. He said it's also his first time, so he doesn't know how long it would last, but their weapons have a buff of sacred power. But obviously, as the guy was from another world, he didn't know it was a buff. Proda explained that it meant that their weapons would work against them, and he said that he had to repay Eli for having saved their lives. That's why they had to help him, and then they were already determined they would fight to survive. The gate ended up opening, and it was pure chaos outside. The warriors were trying to survive. One of those zombies was going to attack that soldier, but a blade ended up going through his head, cutting those two heads in two. They were fascinated. He said he barely touched the zombie with his gun, and it had already been split so easily. Really, that sacred power was a very powerful power, and they said that those zombies were nothing. One of them said that they would help. That soldier said that at that rate, they could really win. He started to say that the hero's descendant was with them, but a strange horse appeared, and it was a knight. The horse was a skeleton on fire, and that monster ended up attacking one of the soldiers, who ended up suffering a very powerful blow while the other stayed on the ground doing nothing. He was totally paralyzed by fear. He said that they couldn't defeat that monster, but a weapon ended up appearing, and it was Proda who was holding the gun behind that warrior. He said he was a little late and ended up asking for an apology. It was his first time using that, so he wasn't very familiar with that weapon. That warrior began to prepare his next attack. The vampire began to explain that he could feel the energy of those living pieces of fresh flesh that he hadn't been able to taste in 50 years right there. He wondered how fresh it would be if he turned into undead, how strong his legion would be. He really was looking forward to this. It was the opportunity he wanted for 50 years. He said that he was a zombie without any strength, guided only by instinct for a goal, and a goal for D-Lan, and a D-Lan for a Lord Zombie. Then finally, he arrived at Vampiro. He commented that it had been a long time since he wanted to become that capable of thinking and judging. Vampires are classified according to the mana they possess. Although he was not recognized by the other vampires not long ago, he became one, but he was still confident. Being someone who received the power of a vampire count since he had that, he was holding a skeleton that was the skull of the king of dead spirits, Ammon. He commented that thanks to this skull, he was able to gather the necessary mana that would take him at least 100 years in just a few decades. It was for him to contemplate that legion of 20,000 dead. In fact, he said that he would soon surpass the level of count and would advance to the path of a king. He began to think that he was no longer afraid of common sacred power. Holy knights are insignificant, and he just wanted him to surrender soon to advance his work and make their living dead. But a cannon ended up being fired while a guy shouted at them not to stop shooting the ballista. The vice commander told them to hold on. He wasn't supposed to let them pass, and as it only happened, the dead would become even stronger. That's why they had to kill as many as they could. If they fell, the village would collapse, and he was thinking that the zombies would already be gone several times in the territory. He didn't know what to do. He couldn't take care of the leadership of that place because they were also being cornered. He wondered if in the end they would really make it. They would probably die if it continued like this. He began to say that if only His Majesty, the Saint, if the Emperor were there, it would be another story. But then Charlotte arrived, saying that the village was fine, and she said that it was obvious because His Majesty, the Prince, the protagonist, was there. She started to say that it was because she was going to protect the village that Her Highness was in. She was holding many weapons in her arms, several spears and several swords. The knight simply stood still for a few moments, and Charlotte threw all the weapons on the ground, leaving only a sword. The holy knight said everything was fine. She also said she heard he wanted the guns moved from there to the top of the women's castle. The knight thought she was just a servant. Even veteran soldiers couldn't carry so many weapons, and he wondered what the hell her strength was. He started to say that even a child like her was trying so hard so he couldn't weaken. He started looking to the side, thinking that everything was fine. They would endure all that, and in the worst case, he would invade that place by force and cut off that vampire's head. Those gigantic zombies ended up putting several zombies in those catapults, and the two were in shock because a pile of zombies was coming towards them, flying in the direction of the castle wall. The Holy Knight said that it was very dangerous, and it was for the girl to stand behind him. He started saying, "O God of War," and then a blue energy began to appear around his sword. He asked him to grant the strength to protect those poor lambs, but before he could even continue, the Garuda advanced towards that zombie, cutting that ball of zombies in the middle. They were easily cut and fell everywhere. The Holy Knight remained on the ground without understanding what had happened, how she had done it. He was completely in doubt, wondering if she had cut a ball of zombies in half. Those zombies were cut by that child's sword. They weren't even able to get up again. He commented that just aiming at their heads or imbuing with a sword with holy power could stop those undead. He wondered what had happened there and what she had on that sword of hers. She kept cutting several zombies without stopping, moving forward and cutting thousands of them. The knight said that her techniques are brutal and sloppy. She was just using the strength of her muscles to fight, and this contradicted her lack of experience with swordsmanship. In any case, that destructive power, that strong slash, is definitely a holy imperial swordsmanship passed down to the sword squad, Santa Cruz. He ended up calling the girl from the top of the wall. He asked her where she had learned that type of sword skill. He also asked if she was a member of the Holy Emperor's family, but she said no. She was just a servant of the prince, in this case, the seventh prince. She explained that swordsmanship she learned from a book. She ended up going to kill more zombies while the knight above was talking that he didn't hear a word she said. The scene ended up cutting, and one of the soldiers ended up saying to the priests that when their sacred powers were exhausted, it was only them. Use those glasses of sacred power to heal the wounded. But the count ended up asking him to wait. He didn't know where those sacred bottles came from. Then the soldier explained that it was the seventh prince who gave before going to Lonia's estate. He said he had brought some with them for prayer. The count started to say that that was very lucky, and ended up asking where the seventh prince was. The soldier said that after he returned from the battle outside, he took the remaining soldiers with him. He said he would help on the walls. The guy got desperate, asking if he really went to battle, and then left again. The soldier said he thought he had allowed him to leave while the count was speechless and said nothing. He looked at all the injured people there and said that seeing how everyone was exalting personality and power, his sacred thing is not that he didn't trust him, but whether there would be any troops left here within the territory. There was blood everywhere, and a strange trail of blood was following those zombies who had infiltrated. It was like warrior zombies. The scene ended up cutting to the wall. The PR was there with his mask. He said that they were the reinforcements. That soldier was even relieved because he thought that everyone had already died. He said that the situation in front of the castle gate was more urgent at that moment. Proto said that he knew, and that's why they dispatched half their forces to castle walls. He began to think that compared to that place, they have more work to do there, so they wouldn't have time to check the faces. Besides, since he was giving holy water, he doesn't have enough left to use, so he can't try to use new skill appropriately. He ended up saying that it was the spectral soldiers. He should have raised the former undead soldiers, but it was so difficult. That's why he only used the corpses from inside the village. They got caught. It's all over. So that's why those undead were hiding their scares. One of those soldiers asked if he was there to treat them because he should have stayed behind instead of doing everything that way. But he said he had things to do along the way too, so he didn't go there for nothing. He wanted to test something using that weapon there, but the soldier said that weapon was useless. It was a type of ornament that would only reach him. Silver said that as imagined, this place has the best view to shoot. He could see their boss clearly from there. He started to load his gun. Obviously, he started to aim at that vampire, and then suddenly he ended up changing his aim. Instead of aiming at the head, he aimed at the eggs. He started channeling that shot and saying that this would be the perfect chance to make him experience Gaia's blessing. The scene ended up cutting to a knight asking what the situation was. The vice commander went there because the evacuation of the territory was finished, and it was supposed to let him help too. That knight said that luckily the situation didn't get worse. He didn't even know how, but the common soldiers were using weapons embedded with holy power. There were others with skills compared to the holy knights who came as additional reinforcements as well. The vice commander didn't understand anything. He wondered what happened while he was defending the castle walls, but he said that anyway, he was happy that things didn't get worse. The knight in front of him said that they still didn't know what to do against the vampires. While he was defeating one undead, he asked about the long-range attack, but the knight said they also tried the ballista. They actually tried to shoot, but when it was fired, there was a magical shield protecting them, and they were blocked by a shield made of mana. Even if you embed the weapon with holy D or soak it in holy water, it will probably still be less powerful than a mana shield that the vampire was covering themselves with, and they didn't really know what to do. This meant that they would have no choice but to advance from that undead region and attack the vampire directly. He started to think that they were overcrowded trying to block them, and that was almost impossible. One of the soldiers behind the vice commander asked what that was. They even thought it was a priest, but after observing properly, the normal priests couldn't do that. They started looking with curiosity, and the vice commander froze. He said that light was Gaia. He began to speak. Gaia, the goddess of love and compassion, please grant your sacred protection to that young lamb and allow me to use the power to destroy the dead. A semblance of Gaia appeared gigantic behind Proto as he said to drill him, and the two of them looked down, wondering who this was. The image of a goddess manifested in the particles of light. This was definitely a blessing granted directly from the goddess Gaia. Even for high-ranking priests, this is something that happens once in a lifetime. He never heard about a priest with so much power coming to the Lonia estate. Charlotte arrived behind the vice commander, catching his attention. She explained to him that she recognized that light, and it was of the seventh prince. It was obvious that he did not believe it until it appeared that the prince who blasphemed against Gaia was receiving her blessing. What kind of contradiction was this? If this person is really the prince, that means the prince was receiving love from the goddess Gaia. Proto was saying that this would be the perfect chance to experience Gaia's blessing, and that Gaia's blessing is in his balls. Calling him a vampire, he ended up shooting that power. That power was very strong. It went through all the zombies like it was nothing. Even that shield couldn't handle the power of that shot that ended up hitting that vampire. Obviously, he started shouting, "Is this Proto's method? It's kind of evil, huh?" The scene ended up cutting. The method of collecting sacred power was explained clearly in the Holy Emperor's monastery book. What he noticed was that praying while magi use spells and mana, priests use their prayers and sacred power. The necromancers use their lifespan and magical power to use their powers. Normally, he would have to hand over his lifespan and magical power in exchange for using this, but there is a but. He wondered if there was any reason to do so. He wondered if he didn't have enough holy power to be the grandson of the Holy Emperor. In that moment, he was thinking that if he could use his power without having to sacrifice his lifespan, then it's worth giving reigns a try. That's why he thought and decided to try, and he actually got it. The vampire was writhing, screaming. He asked everyone to retreat immediately, and Proto was happy. He thought he had to work hard because of his shield, but he was still able to pierce it. That was really good. Everyone started shouting that the Legion of the Living Dead was retreating. Proto thought it was a shame he didn't die, but that should give them time to reorganize themselves. Then he looked to the side. All those warriors were looking at him, and Proto ended up putting his hand on his mask, saying that they would treat the injured soon. The warriors below said that this was their first time seeing a blessing from the goddess and wondered if he really was a high-rank priest. If that was the case, the injured would be healed quickly too. The vice commander wondered if this really was the seventh prince, a 0 on the left who deserved to be exiled. He wondered if he could really achieve all this in a single day. He began to look at Charlotte smiling, and was imagining how that child with such skill that she had would be wishing to become the hands and feet of the 7th prince. But now he thought he had really understood all of it. He said that His Highness had changed. He really hadn't believed it. He ended up sighing and saying that he really changed after losing his memories. Possibly, if he forgot what happened that day 5 years ago when he returned to his old self. He said that in this case, he was talking about his personality that he had before the death of His Highness. It ended up being shown to us the mother of the 1st and 7th prince called Yulia, a country girl of common origin. She was a mixed ethnicity from the Holy Nation and the southern nation Islam, with the two being in a bad relationship for hundreds of years. As a result, several nobles and priests, even the current Holy Emperor, disapproved of her. But the Holy Emperor's son loved her with all his heart, so they got married and gave birth to the 1st prince. But obviously, it wasn't that perfect. A great influence from the Holy Emperor's family appointed 2 young ladies of noble blood as the concubines to the son of the Holy Emperor. Thereafter, several princes and princesses were born. She gave birth to the 7th prince, and when the 7th prince reached his 10th birthday, she died. She was attacked by a vampire during a night walk with her 2 children. While she was trying to protect the 7th prince, she was torn apart and passed away. The 1st prince, who barely survived the attack, suffered a curse in his heart and fell ill. The kind 7th prince became dishonest after this incident. The 7th prince was so shocked that they said he became crazy. At that moment, the Holy Knight was thinking that the person who lost his memories after trying to commit suicide got his original personality back, maybe. But then he started to think more about the fact that he lost his memories, and it had nothing to do with his strong holy power. Even if he lost his memories or not, because he had his sacred power in secret for so long, it was indeed strange. No one would hide it out of nowhere. One of the hypotheses is that he did not want to attract the attention of the Holy Emperor's family. Maybe it's because he wanted to get revenge in the future. There's no way to know. He understands this well because he was there too. The imperial palace did not accept its royalty or princes well. It was better for princes, but nobles always hurled insults at their royalty. He was thinking that the 7th prince was actually planning to take revenge on the nobles and the vampires who led to his royalty's death, i.e., his mother. But he may also have deliberately allowed himself to be exiled to build a force, get stronger away from the imperial palace's surveillance. Since he was a holy knight closely related to the royal family, he can understand why he acted so undisciplined in front of him. Besides, he started talking about Charlotte. That child could totally be the daughter of one of the great families. He began to remember how he was always sweet and kind. Even with the 1st prince having ordered the island to seek reinforcements, he should never have abandoned them. To this day, he always regrets that decision. No matter how much he tried to forget his shameful past in which he was unable to protect His Highness, it seems that the 7th prince has been getting stronger and stronger for his revenge. While he endured all kinds of insults, cruelty being an exiled prince, and the 7th prince wants to revenge in the name of His Highness, nothing is more certain than him helping him. But to do that, they had to survive that attack. They should solve all of Lonia's problems first. The scene ended up cutting to the vice commander walking through the city. Then he asked if he was on patrol, but the soldier in front of him didn't answer anything. He wondered if the soldier didn't hear it because of the strong wind, but then he realized and started thinking that patrolling without a torch on that dark night was very strange. He was beginning to think that it wasn't human and started attacking that monster. But that zombie ended up defending him from his attack, and he realized that it was an undead. The other undead that were there ended up throwing some spears at the ground, and he realized that there were a lot of them. He also commented that he could feel the sacred power coming from them. What the hell is this, undead with sacred power? He said that even if that was the case, he couldn't simply leave them alone and end up launching the attack. But Proto said to stop both of them, and even the deputy commander realized that the undead also stopped with the command of Proda. He looked at Proda and asked what was happening there. Proda just told him to put down his sword. The Silver asked if he had finished organizing his troops because the legion of undead would attack them again. The vice commander tried to call him Highness, but Proda said that after midnight it would be the day when the king of the dead spirit's hand died, and he thought that the legion of undead would become even more powerful. The vice commander tried even harder to draw his attention by asking if he was using necromancy. Proda remained silent for a while until he said that he didn't know either, but inside he was thinking that now that he found out, everything was ruined. The vice commander said that this was not something he could say so indifferently, and asked if he was so desperate that he had to learn necromancy. But the black guy said he really didn't know, he just knew. He only knew how to use that magic. He even said that as he guessed, he himself summoned those undead. After losing his memories, he can't really remember how he was able to control those things. He only did because he thought it would help in the war. He was thinking that if he told them he came from another world, obviously they wouldn't believe it, just think he was crazier than he already was. They stared at each other for a moment. Then the vice commander started to say that if he had made a deal with the devil, but he was cut off because the order said that if he had made the living dead, he would not have sacred power. Again, he said he was not hiding anything. To begin with, maybe he always had an interest in necromancy and wondered if he would inform the judges. The vice commander said it was clear because he should do it. Proda was thinking, if they torture and capture me, I'm screwed. Maybe Charlotte will get screwed because she'll try to save me. But then the vice commander spoke. He ended up kneeling, which surprised Proda. He simply said that he wouldn't do that. They looked at each other for a moment. He said he would help him until the end, calling him Highness. Proda, at that moment, was thinking that the vice commander hated him, so why did he want to help him? He started to think that that person was uptight, and he began to wonder if he was trying to get a goal or something. He was a bad person to follow, right? Even then, Proda came to the conclusion that he wasn't trying to help him, but was keeping an eye on him, probably. He couldn't trust him too much, or the vice commander would be discredited. He said no, he wasn't trying to keep an eye on him. He started to talk about Proda's childhood, but Proda interrupted him and told him to forget about that for now. They were supposed to do what they came there for first. The moon was already red while he said that he thought it was time. They wouldn't waste too much precious time with abundant mana like that. He ended up saying Merry Christmas to Harmond. All those zombies were nervous and agitated, while Proda also said Happy Halloween. The vampire began to say that for all the living dead there, their time had come, and now they would eat the living and evolve. He would make sure they all become kings too. The vampire started channeling magic, a purple energy surrounding his face. A powerful attack hit the wall, and the people inside were in shock. The count told them to stay in position. A blond boy started saying that he was very scared and thought he couldn't do it. He commented that the part of his face that was hit by the prince was still hurting, and it was impossible to do something like that. The count wondered if this was the right decision. The power of the living dead was incomparable to the years earlier and was suppressing the spirit of the soldiers. He began to think that perhaps he should be withdrawing the soldiers and not reorganizing them for war. But he realized that there was a priest there with him. He said that he was the priest who went to save them. Proda started calling Gaia to please give her blessing for those who fight him. The Ava system showed that the ability had been activated. He began to think, prog deliberative, and lots of holy water began to circulate to everyone. The count began to say that it was incredible. The priest was with them, so all was not lost. They started shouting that Gaia was with them, also fighting, and they started attacking those zombies with their buffed weapons. The vice commander called the god of war, asking for strength, and launched a powerful attack with his sword on the ground. He started to think that this was the prince's chance to boost the morale of the soldiers. He couldn't miss this opportunity. His objective was to go after that vampire. the vampire began to say that the priest was constantly blocking his path, and the area hit by that guy's holy power wouldn't recover. He started screaming like a crazy person who couldn't hold back his fury anymore. The vice commander already started to channel a skill, but suddenly the vampire passed by his side, and he was in shock. The vampire simply stepped on that zombie that was there. The vice commander started shouting to stop him. He said that vampire was after the priest, and the vampire was in a different form now. He was thinner and with the mask on his face. The vampire asked if they would try to stop him. He was gigantic. He grabbed one of the soldiers and dared them to try to stop him. Proto was drinking holy water, saying in his thoughts that he knew he would try to provoke him at first, so he could see the mana flow. That vampire could also see his sacred power, so it was only a matter of time before he found it. The best decision for him was to run to a place that gave him an advantage. Just as he planned, he would use the dense wall of the territory. This way, he would make it difficult for that guy to chase him. When he least noticed, there was a giant rock almost falling on top of him. He actually fell to the ground with a black power and dodged. The vampire was there saying for the priest to die and channeling that magic again. Proto was saying that he was right. He knew that it would be impossible, so he would go to plan C. He called Charlotte. She ended up coming up with a gigantic piece of the wall. She went in front of the park to defend it, holding that stone while the vampire's attack hit them. He started to think that his magic was very strong, and the wall probably wouldn't hold. Even Charlotte still didn't know how to control her power properly, and at this rate, they would be melted together by his magic. But then someone unknown appeared and shouted Charlotte's name. He simply started to help her hold that rock, saying that even if he couldn't use a sword, he would still help his daughter. They continued holding on while Proto asked how he would help since he didn't have any power. He started channeling a skill, thinking that he wouldn't be able to deal with his sacred power appropriately for now. But if that wall could also be strengthened with divine energy, it would withstand that vampire's attack. He called on Gaia to please give her strength to protect those noble lambs and grant her protection to prevent the dead with her power, ira, love, and mercy. Then he said that since he prayed for please, she was supposed to do something and help. A shield appeared around that wall, a strong energy along with holy water and everything else going everywhere. The vampire started to freeze, and soon after, a big stone explosion happened, going everywhere. Charlotte started asking if Proto was there, but she realized it wasn't Proto. The one on the floor was her father, Grill. Proto held her shoulder, saying he was fine. He just passed out, and she shouldn't panic. Proto started saying it was tiring. He felt like he was really dying, but everything was fine. By the way, he was looking for the vampire. Where is the vampire? Then the vampire started talking about the sacred power. His body was burning. Silver said it was his chance to finish with that guy. Charlotte said it was too heavy for his body to keep fighting, but he commented that he knew this. Because of this, he was empty of holy power, so he had no other thought but to attack him recklessly. He was saying it's a chance for them to dry out. He asked her to carry Grill because they would go underground. He began to think that his sacred power was running out faster than he imagined, but his thought was interrupted. He thought the mask, that mask that the vampire was wearing. He said that the sister wasn't gathering around the vampire, but from somewhere else, and it was that mask. He started going towards the mask while Charlotte asked if he wouldn't go with her. He simply asked her to wait because there was something he wanted to see first. It was the skull that the vampire put around his neck, and it got stronger. He wondered what its function was. The system warned that it was the skull of King Croman Ammon. The user's magical power would be amplified by 20%, even 200%, based on each pattern. The recovery level would be increased by 10%. All spell-related skill effects are increased by 10%. The vampire was burnt because of that holy water. He started saying that that priest had screwed up everything. He had to recover soon, but when he put his hand on his face, he realized that the skull was no longer there. He became desperate because he looked to the side and realized that it was with the priest, in Prota's case. He started to go towards Prota like a madman, like an animal. Silver thought he couldn't understand even after looking at that attribute window. The shape of that item was quite strange, and he wanted to test it. He ended up putting it on his neck. The system warned that the strengthening was unstable due to the lack of sacred power, and that was the temporary strengthening equipment. Prota said he was the Legion. The vampire was freezing. He said that this was the heir to Gaia's legacy, and he was completely in the position. Several energy currents ended up trapping the vampire, while the system said the trigger word was confirmed. Those chains totally tied him up. He was totally defeated. An unknown voice started to say that he could smell the lingering scent of death. He was the one who broke the rules of the world, and that was the reason they were created. Maybe he knows after hearing the command. Several skeletons appeared while a window in the system said it was the sacred night. The voice spoke. "Dear Lord, please give us your command." Prota was there with the mask. He really didn't understand much, but the one who really didn't understand was the vampire. He wondered what that was. He also wanted to know what rules he had broken. Was it because he was a dead man with sacred power or a dead man with an ego? He really didn't know. He never heard anything like that. He began to say that the things that betray the will of Judai, the god of death. But he was interrupted before continuing. Silver said that he was also very confused and said that he had to use that beautiful weapon alone. He said that in the name of the priest and the sacred power, Merry Christmas to that vampire, and ended up shooting with his weapon. That shot ended up hitting the vampire, consequently going through his head. At that moment, Prota was gathered with those skeletons and undead. Prota was quite exhausted and ended up falling to the ground. All the undead around him ended up decaying. Everyone around started to celebrate. After all, they were alive in an undead attack wave. The deputy commander ended up arriving, saying that he had been a little late. Outside, a horse ended up being sighted. Someone said it seems so, sir. An old man said that he heard there was a sign of abnormality in the land of the dead, and he thought the rain necromancer had been resurrected. But in the end, it was just a mere vampire playing a prank. He also didn't know how he managed to accumulate 20,000 undead. The soldier ended up saying that the colony consists mostly of prisoners and residents. The old man said that since that guy couldn't even pierce his defenses, it seems like vampires aren't that strong. But he said that anyway, it was strange. The atmosphere he felt since they arrived was a trace of the conforms between the large amount of sacred power and magical power. If that vampire had that much power, no one would be able to block it, and that was really strange. The soldiers asked if they weren't the people who proclaimed themselves as saints. Then the old man said that it would be good if they became vampires as time went by, began to stealthily infiltrate humans, and it would be much easier if they had a priest or a priestess to help them. A guy ended up saying that God separated himself into fragments as a form of entertainment to awaken the sacred power of people. That is why they are not common and much less easily awakened. The old man said he knew that he was only saying that because there is no one good enough in the palace who could do such things. He asked them to send priestesses, healers, and chemists to take care of the residents first, and then the prisoners. The soldiers ended up saying they understood, but one of them ended up arriving asking for permission. He said that the seventh prince was also there and asked if he would meet with him. But he was interrupted, asking if he would really find this guy and really find the seventh prince. He spoke in a mocking tone as if he really didn't want to. The soldier ended up getting very scared, saying that they would go back. The old man said that there was no need to see a child who dishonored his mother, calling him a grandson. This was Kelty Fuss. He was 105 years old, the Holy Emperor. He started to say that he bet he was shaking with fear in some corner of the mansion at that moment. The scene ended cutting. The vice commander said that the seventh prince just hunted the vampire. The old man, the emperor, started to get shocked. He asked what he had said. He asked if he was joking because there are certain limits to jokes, right? This nonsense doesn't make any sense. He had already heard a lot of things about this boy in the past. He put his hand on his face, asking if he was talking about the seventh prince, the same as he knows, Allah knows. The deputy commander said that yes, it was the same one. While they were at Lonia's property for volunteer work, he hunted the vampire. The old man thought Armin was a pure person, but it turns out he isn't. He started screaming, asking if he wanted to be beaten. One of the old men who was there said that it seemed like the Holy Emperor was a little upset at the moment. He said that Ramon already knew. Someone asked Raphael if he really believed that it was the power of the seventh prince that defeated that vampire. Raphael's story, 100 years ago, he was an archbishop. The guys started to say that that boy was a scoundrel and future, and that he only served to be selfish and perverse. He also had no good manners and much less common sense. How could they believe he did important things like that? At that moment, the warrior vice commander was holding everything by himself. He started to think that, as expected, staying on the seventh prince's side was not an easy task. To be royal, he didn't even believe it if he hadn't seen it with his own eyes. He started to say that he was just reporting what he saw. But then one of the old men said that there was actually another report from Lonia residents defending the seventh prince. Some even called him a priest and wondered why they didn't try to investigate this. Maybe he can relate with the strange energy he felt last time, also calling the Majesty. But the old man didn't want to believe it. He called Raphael, asking if he really believed it was the power of the seventh prince. But Raphael said no. He just said he was trying to prevent the seventh prince from stealing the credits from someone else, and that's why they had to investigate. The old man was so pissed he managed to break his chair by squeezing his fists. The old man ended up calling Heron. He said that he hadn't determined whether what he reported was true or false, but they should all be credited for protecting the territory of Lonia's property. He was granting the title of Count to Gino Lapang, the Lord of Alonia, and to the Holy Knight Harmond. He was giving away the small territory in the northwest region. He was supposed to decrease the period of exile of the seventh prince. As soon as the seventh prince fully recovers, he would order him to return to the palace. The scene cut to a boy who commented that he was back from the mission, calling His Highness while he asked to come in. He entered the room holding a candle and asked how he had been, but the guy who was lying in bed said that it was an interesting joke that he was telling to a person who could die at any moment. A joke? This isn't cool at all. This was Prota's brother, the first Prince Lewin. He started saying that his vision and addiction were getting worse, and it seemed like he didn't have much time left for them to talk about some other things. He asked him not to be sad like that, to go see him closer. He heard what happened in the field of battle. When Harmon approached him, he ended up pulling him. He said he protected the seventh prince, His Majesty. He said he protected such rubbish that he tarnished the name of his mother who sacrificed her life for both of them. That was unforgivable. He was really angry and asked if Heron was okay in the head. The first prince was totally crazy, asking that since he was going to die soon, he probably now chose to side with that guy, that is, the seventh prince. The vice commander told him to calm down, but he didn't listen. He spoke that he chose to be on the wrong side by choosing that scoundrel and said that there was no way that guy would become the next king. The vice commander was trying to get his attention. He was trying too hard and was bleeding again. He finally got tired and apologized because he knew he's not that kind of person. The deputy commander said that he wasn't supposed to apologize because he knew that in the first place he wasn't to blame for this. Not even the seventh prince had. He said that he was responsible for Iulia's death. No matter what kind of orders were given to him, he should have maintained his position. But then the first prince said that if he had maintained his position, everyone would have died. He knew very well that they were able to leave the reserve troops alive because of thinking that their skin was rotting because of that curse. Now he was practically dead. The vice commander called the first prince and asked why he hated the seventh prince. He said that of course he hated him because he was asking. Obviously, he brought shamefully and carelessly used the life his precious mother gave him. But then the vice commander said that perhaps the seventh prince deliberately proclaimed himself as a scoundrel. He hid his real intentions in order to get his revenge for the lady and Yulia. With that, he managed to build his strength. He really acted as a channel. He himself went into exile on purpose. But then the first prince asked Ramon if he was sick because it looks like he was worse than he was all bandaged up. Ramon replied no, while the first prince asked him to rest a little if he was tired. Just go rest. Ramon said he had to complete the orders of the Holy Emperor. He would go to the property of Lonia soon again. The first prince said that if it was the order of the first emperor, everything would be fine. He said it was time for his sister channel to return. 3 weeks after the wave of death on the property of Lonia, a scream ended up being heard. Charlotte's father asked how long he had to continue digging. After working so hard sweeping and cleaning that place for 3 weeks, finally the place was worthy of being called Villa again. He wondered if there wouldn't be payment. In a rule, they should help each other, especially when there was a difficult situation. In any case, he couldn't leave Charlotte in a place like that. But then he found something. He said that it was the belongings of the living dead, and it looked like they were gathering some things. But then a box ended up shining. He commented that those belongings were hundreds of years old, so theoretically it wouldn't have a right owner. He said that if they could clean it, it would definitely shine again, so he would also theoretically own it. He looked from side to side to see if there was no one there, and he said that he worked very hard. He helps in the village. So this is a fair payment, isn't it? But then he realized that there was a paper there, and it was a strange paper. He ended up holding it up and asked if it was expensive. The scene ended cutting. Charlotte asked if he wanted more food while he said he didn't need it. He was drilling a bone and said that this was the first time he had eaten so much like that. Charlotte explained that it was because he just woke up after passing out for 3 weeks. The doctor also said he had to eat as much as he could. Proda said yes, the doctor said that to him. It also strengthened his vigor. He said that just waking up was already a miracle. He remembered the doctor and asked how much of his sacred energy he had used because the depletion of the holy power he experienced is extremely dangerous, enough to leave someone incapacitated. But he recovered very quickly with just some holy power and medicine. This was a miracle. He asked to be careful because his body was still exhausted. He asked if he had become a walking dead. Then someone asked why he was saying these nasty things. Of course he hadn't become undead. If he was honest, the person next to him was more possibly dead alive, in which case he was referring to Charlotte while she held the bandages on Proda's face. He explained that when he was passed out, he also treated that person next to him. He asked if they were exposed to the holy power of the mana. Silver asked what was wrong, if there was a problem in the case. He explained that in general cases, people become crippled, incapacitated, and even die. It is not common for the body to evolve as one of that person. He could see His Majesty from 50 years ago. While His Majesty was in a coma after being defeated by the king necromancer Ammon, his body was injured due to the shock of the sacred power and mana. Then he heard that they had to recreate his body over and over again. In that time, his body evolved beyond its limitations. He even heard why His Majesty can defeat the necromancer King Ammon is because he received that overhuman body, and that was the only reason. He asked if that girl was also the case. Proda looked at her and realized that she was Charlotte, 16 years old. She worked with firm concentration, high concentration, superhuman body, and much more. Charlotte questioned why Proda was staring at her. He thought that people with bodies like that should be heroes, right? Someone with a soft body like his just said he was a little bored, so he wanted to read some books. He asked if she could bring him some, and she said yes. As she left, he started to think that it was good that he got Ammon's skull, but the Rico effect is too strong on his body. He cannot handle that power. The sacred power should be used efficiently, but it was difficult since it was different from mana. That's why they would start with the theory of magic by the Holy Emperor, the power of sacred and Renaissance, the study of the resurrection. He said it was good that everything was written there in detail. He started reading, and he said that his faith was very extreme for God Agaya, but he had to hurry up soon to control his sacred power and use the zombies efficiently. Charlotte watched him study. Someone ended up arriving, and the person said he could come in. It was Ramon. He said he finally woke up. He explained that it's been a few days since he woke up, and he heard that he went to the palace but arrived earlier than he imagined. Ramon said that yes, he had news and needed to tell him, and that's why he went to the city again so quickly. Proda started to think that that was Ramon, that scoundrel. He made a big deal, rewarding them when they were after Morgana. Would he give another reward, maybe money or vacation? While Proda had his eyes shining to know what it was, Ramon said that the person who gave the orders was to return to the capital. Proda's happiness ended there. He got cold. He is literally in shock and ends up hearing this, throwing the vice commander out while he is outside telling him that he has to go back. Charlotte says it looks like he was still calling Proda, and Proda tells Charlotte to just ignore him as if he wasn't there. The vice commander keeps calling Proda all the time. Charlotte asks why he didn't want to go back to the palace. Proda says that he didn't want to go back to such a dangerous place. He starts to remember some things he still doesn't know, like who was behind Morgana's case. He should have asked about it before killing her. Charlotte starts saying the word dangerous, and Proda says he would take care of it on his own and to just ignore him. After that day, Proda didn't know, but Ramon kept repeatedly calling him. He even appeared in the window, putting some messages on the food going to Proda. Proda was really getting upset and couldn't take it anymore, so he put the pillow on his head, hiding. After a while, Charlotte comes out saying that she wanted to deliver a message from the prince. Ramon asks, "Oh, what was it?" She says he sent it like this, "Leaked right before I throw salt on you." Ramon asks if she was going home at that moment while she says yes. She was staying in an inn with her father, even more on the castle side. Ramon asks her to let him kind of listen to her there at night. She says that she is fine, so there is no need. He says that the reason he wanted to go was to hear the reason why the prince was continuing to reject going to the palace. He asks if she knew anything about it, and she ends up saying that Proda only said that the palace was dangerous. The knight says that it's true the prince's position in the palace is not good, but to say dangerous was already an exaggeration. Charlotte starts to think that it was already expected. Even his relationship with his brothers is not good, and someone was trying to take his life. She says that if she was stronger at that moment, she could protect him. She ends up seeing her father calling her, saying that she was late. He is surprised that the knight was following. The knight remembers that he was also fighting there, just like him, with Morgana. Her father says it was clear because it's only natural to help people with problems. The vice commander says it was commendable of him. If everything was fine, he wanted to know what he did in that battle that time. The guy gets embarrassed and starts to explain that he finished off 50 big zombies while the knight was praising him. He was even pissing his pants, but Charlotte just ignores it. She hears her father saying that he was also able to catch the vampire count's claws. Charlotte asks what that was. While her father didn't understand, she explains that there was a document she had never seen in the dining area. He explains that this is a kind of talisman that he hasn't taken off in a while. He starts saying that it looked very old, but it's not. It's because it's been a long time since he took it off, and he is starting to give in, saying that he definitely didn't steal it from anywhere. Harmon starts to think that it was some family's document. He asks if it was the seal of the Reiser family. This was a family that defended the northern region of Lonia for 50 years. The family was annihilated in the deadly battle with the necromancer King Ammon. He begins to think that they are more loyal to the Holy Emperor than any other. Because a document from the bravest family on earth was there, he starts touching it. He wonders if these two would happen to be survivors of this Reiser family. He says he was right and now understands why they both have so much strength. Possibly, they lived in hidden form since their family fell and still take care of the prince without anyone knowing. with unshakable devotion to the sacred emperor. He greatly respects their kindness in keeping everyone's mission and secret. They both don't understand what he means by goodness and mission. He says that it was for both of them to please accept the letter of recommendation. He says that he could refine his daughter's skills. It seems he still wants to stay with the seventh prince, so he himself would write a letter of recommendation to the Holy Knight for him. Her father asks if Charlotte could go to the palace, and he says yes. It wouldn't be difficult to receive the title of nobility, and if she wants, she could even learn swordsmanship of the Holy Empire. She would be a great help to the prince. She ends up being delighted and says that she would accept this offer, but had doubts about becoming a holy knight. If that meant being separated from the prince, she wouldn't want to. He says that if protecting the prince was her mission, he would work hard to protect the prince together with her. He begins to think that he would do what is necessary to escort the Reiser family and the prince to the palace. After a while, they were already on the road. Harmond asks why he changed his mind so suddenly. Heron explains that the night before, Proda closed the door in his face because he didn't want to go to the palace at all. Proda says that it was because there isn't a book that isn't in the royal library. He remembers a book that he was reading, saying it was very good. Heron says that is true. It also seemed like he was putting effort into studying his magic, calling out to the seventh prince. Proda says that after he tried to use magic, he found it interesting but would only receive severe looks in the palace and would just lock himself in the library and never leave again. Ramon says that really, he would probably have bad eyes after they got there. He just asks Proda to relax since he hadn't been back there for a while. The city is much richer than the lands of the dead, so there are several things he could do there. Proda was really enjoying his vision of the place, even Charlotte. She commented that there were a lot of people there, and Harmon says that it is because it is the capital. The land has become even more prosperous than the time Proda was there. Harmon asks if Proda didn't like that place. Proda says that it fed both Charlotte and Harmon into shock. Silver ends up calling Heron and asks him to ask a question. He ends up pointing and asks if the capital had any living dead or something. Proda simply runs out. A woman who was selling fruit for just 5 bronze ends up being bumped into by the poor guy. They both apologize because they had to resolve something. Proda starts to think that at first glance it might look like a busy street, but he's sure that was vampire scent. If he followed that stench, he would definitely find him. Ramon starts calling Proda, asking if he saw anything. Proda arrived in an alley, and there was a strange head. A woman was crying with flowers. She just opened her red eye and started screaming like crazy. Proda takes his gun and separates her head. Charlotte asked if that was a living dead, and Proda said he had heard of similar situations. That trunk was strange. Maybe that was the body of the head on the ground. It looks like the lower part was sucked out and only the skin was left. Proda heard from an alley that he was being followed. He looked to the side while Heron asks if he was okay. The unknown guy said he was a middle-aged, red-haired man. The man ran away after observing them. Heron said that the possibility of this unknown, middle-aged man being eyed was high. Proda says that he thought so. It is too difficult to track because the stench is spread everywhere. Harmon says that he would inform them when they arrive at the palace. Proda explains that he only went there to learn about magic, but he has a bad feeling about it. Lawrence's was in a chaotic state. There have been several similar cases of murder like the one that happened there on the street. It's because of bizarre cases of murder and the palace. It's because of your visit, the Prince Kanala. They became chaotic for unknown reasons. Proda managed to enter the palace safely. The scene cuts to Heron saying that he was almost begging him, and he didn't do anything. Proda says that he had already understood and asks how many times he would continue saying it. Heron says that he was just a child. He brings up the subject that Charlotte ends up breaking up with him, saying that she was going to take a look at the palace. Heron comments that if anyone asked who she was associated with, just say his name or vice captain of the Holy Knights. She ends up saying that she understood. Proda says he would go straight to the library. Harmon simply tells him to go down the hall and turn to the left side of the library courtyard. Charlotte says she would escort Proda after finishing her patrol. Silver says he was feeling like a child who was being looked after by his parents. Walking around the palace, Proda begins to think that he thought he was wrong. Maybe the vampire entered the palace and somehow it seems very threatening. He would just keep quiet, like Harmon said. He should just run after finding a magic book. He kept walking, thinking he would go to the library first. He didn't think it was even screwing up the library. He kept walking in circles in the same place. Then he sees a very beautiful statue and realizes it was his mother. He went and looked at what was written. She had been dead for a long time. Then he heard a voice behind him. An unknown man said that leaving it to those brats was a mistake. They ended up forcing that old man there alone. Proda starts to think that it was probably the gardener. The gardener suddenly gets up with his scissors, saying that he should cut off all the necks of those who used this as decoration. Proda asked, "Hey, the guy is an asshole. I don't understand." The old man keeps saying how those bastards can be so lazy with the people who pay the people's taxes. He ends up calling Proda, saying that he arrived and should go there and greet him. He ends up calling Proda to get the shovel and the land. Proda thinks, "Hey, I'm not a gardener," while the old man says he thought there was a lack of decoration in that tree and simply says he would use his head, which was perfect. He says he would take it at that moment. After he picks it up, he says it is very heavy. He should have worn the new clothes that Heron gave him. He also thought that it looked like that old man mistook him for the new gardener because of his appearance. Proda asks if that was enough. He thought it was a misunderstanding and was already going further. He then comments that the old man had a lot of earth in his body and asks if he wanted to borrow the handkerchief. He takes the handkerchief from his pocket. He says it was possible for the old man not to work alone. He should ask the others for help. The old man, instead of taking the handkerchief, takes Proda's arm. The old man commented that he thinks it is true that he lost his memories. Not only did his personality change, but he didn't understand anything. The old man asks if he could recognize him. He was his grandfather. Proda is taken to the palace. His grandfather says that the seventh prince could be entering. His grandfather was on the throne while Proda started saying that he didn't believe that Guy was the holy emperor. He regrets having just passed by there. The emperor says that he heard from some people that he played an important role in the subjugation of Lonia's property. Proda simply replies that yes, that was it. He ends up asking that he also heard that it was he who killed the Count of Vampires and asks if this was really true. When he was ready to respond, he began to think about whether he should deliver the letter. He said that even the citizens of Loria were aware of the incident, so there was no way the Holy Empire didn't know. It was kind of obvious that there was a vampire behind that incident. Instead of being recognized for his contribution to the Lonia estate, he should be planning to find someone who can catch this vampire. He was looking at the emperor while he said he checked the facts of the case. He ends up saying at the end that yes, he was right. He managed to do it. He says he wouldn't be able to catch him alone again, even if he died and came back to life. He starts to explain that it was something he just managed to do with the help of many people, including Harmon, Charlotte, Lord Gennard, and even Grill. He also received great help from the citizens of the Lonia estate. It wasn't just his own power. He starts to think that they would give out the credit to prevent problems. The emperor stands still for a few moments, breathing deeply. The emperor says that he saw and heard well. He comments that Proda had a long trip and must be tired, and he should make sure to rest well. Proda says that yes, he understood. Finally, Proda says that he hopes he finds these vampires safely. The emperor stands still for a few moments. After a while, he begins to wonder if he heard this from Heron. Just a year ago, Proda was a cruel scoundrel, and now he was totally changed. He could recognize his pride and the help of other people. He even realizes the existence of vampires circulating in the capital. He says that this brat had changed. He wonders if someone losing their memory changes their personality. He starts to think about Charlotte and Grill. He says that according to Harmon, they were survivors of the Iser family. If that were true, they might have been successful in finding that vampire. They are not a family with a reputation for swordsmanship using sacred power. He says that the report he received from Lord Janad commented that the seventh prince saved the lives of soldiers who were on the verge of death using his sacred power. He wonders if that was all. There is also a story they told him about the battlefield. A semblance of God ended up coming down and staying on Prota's side. That's why he managed to shoot the vampire with a decoration gun like it was nothing. Even though that person was wearing a mask, Janad said he was sure the person was Alan. He was almost sure it was nonsense at first. He asks the other guys in the room what their opinion is about this whole case. One of them says that he is sure it is all a lie. He starts saying that the prince didn't stay on the battlefield for long. Someone else says that the masked person has the same constitution as the prince, so there was no way he could have any flaws. A war starts with people not believing and others saying that it was logical to believe. The emperor simply puts his hand on his head, saying that those people are bad. He starts to think that it's time for him to leave the throne. That meant he had to have a successor, someone to help him. He starts to remember Lisha. Out of nowhere, he would have chosen Lewin to be his successor. He says that it was already part of his failure to become very insensitive. He thinks more about the security of the kingdom than about his grandchildren. He wonders if there is a possibility of that boy because he probably had the power to escape the empires. While people are fighting, the emperor says that if he didn't want to die or get punched, he'd better shut up. The guy acts like a piano player while one of them tells the emperor to calm down. But then a guy with red hair arrives, commenting that there is still a lot of time, and they just needed to investigate further. The guy also says that the anniversary of Iulia's death will be in 2 months, and it would be good if the seventh prince was still in the palace instead of him just leaving. He still contributed to the hunting of vampires. According to this extra, until the next banquet, let them rest until then, since he was already tired. The emperor remains silent for a while and then says that the boy was really right. A banquet was coming, and there is no need to rush. After a while, Silver finally finds the bookstore. He wonders why the palace is so complicated, but there is someone already there and asks if it is the seventh prince. The plate stands still and is surprised that there is still someone there because he thought that at that time there wouldn't be anyone. The person simply says they are sorry and will leave at that moment. Prota says that she doesn't need to. She could just sit there. She doesn't quite understand, and he thought that she looked very uncomfortable. He hadn't even done anything, and she was already like that. But then he ends up having a memory of nothing. He says he doesn't even end up reminding her of some event. That was Alice Astoria, 17 years old, granddaughter of the Archbishop. He starts to understand that's why she was so uncomfortable. She must think he was some kind of pervert who came back to her or something like that. A book ends up appearing. The author was Raphael. The story, the name of the author of the book he seeks has the same surname, and he wonders if it is the same writer of the Archbishop's book. He remembers that this was the Archbishop who he ended up calling Gaia's slave. To think that he knew the act that way, he can't even dream of asking him a question. He looks at the girl and says sorry if he surprised her. He lost his memory, so he forgot most of the things or people in the palace. From her reaction, he says in his thoughts that he wouldn't believe himself if he were in her place. That's why he just leaves the place and starts picking up the books to get out as quickly as possible. But then he realizes that a book is missing. The girl simply says that maybe he was looking for her grandfather, or in this case, the Archbishop. The Prot says yes, that really was the case. She says that she was reading but could give it to him. He says that he didn't need it because he didn't intend to disturb her while she was reading. She still says that everything was fine. She was about to clean up before leaving, so she realized that this was the book about the resurrection. It was a pretty grand title for a book, wasn't it? She also comments that it is just the record of her grandfather's research, nothing special. In the first place, it is impossible to resurrect people in any way. The question is, what is the reason that makes it impossible to resurrect someone? The girl explains that no matter how alive the sacred power is, you can't simply catch a soul that left the body. Only necromancy could capture souls, but necromancy has a sinister price, and it wasn't a good thing to do. That's why resurrection is impossible, even if Gaia gives them a miracle. The prot asks what would happen if someone has sacred power and magical power. The girl says that in these cases, it is extremely rare. If you used both at the same time, your body would explode. Prota says that he thought it wasn't so impossible. He opens the book and starts to see. The girl asks what he was thinking, and the silver guy says that the book says that if someone wanted to better use the sacred power, you had to pray more. It says that magicians could lose mana and spells. As for dark mages, they use their magical power and lifespan. He asks if there is any way for someone to better use their sacred power. The girl says that if he is asking about something better than praying, he could use a magic tool. She commented that saying resurrection was possible is very suspicious. Prota says that he accidentally made a child who was leaving spend so much time talking to him. After that, Prota told her that it was late, so she should go to her house. She says no, she wouldn't go now, but he interrupts again, saying that she seems quite uncomfortable with him and doesn't need to deny it because it is kind of obvious, right? While she tries to explain that that wasn't what was happening, Prota pushes her out, saying that he would make sure to turn off the library lights after he left. He ends up saying goodnight to her while she stays out of the house. He simply kicked her out, and she stands outside wondering about the resurrection talk. She starts to think he should just be doing a bluff. It was a special way of his, but she says that it seems like he was different this time. He didn't seem to be normal. She says that she really felt his aura was completely different. A man calls that girl, Alice, and she realizes that it was her grandfather. She asks who she was talking to. She explains that she was studying in the library while saying that she was full of curiosities because she was just like him. But she had to be careful because the seventh prince was back in the palace. She says that she understood and would be careful. He ends up handing a mask to her while he was telling her not to try too hard. The old man keeps saying that she was chosen by the goddess and has great talent. But the work she has to do also brings great responsibility. She says that she already knew that, and yet he shouldn't worry because she would be a very strong person, just like him. Her grandfather is very happy to hear this. He says that then they would go to a place. They end up opening the door, and apparently it was the first prince. He was full of D all over, wrapped up. They said that they would start the treatment that day. Alice puts on her mask. A lot of sacred power begins to appear around, and the prince begins to scream in pain. The girl realizes that her grandfather's power was very strong. She realizes that in front of the cursed body, even her power is useless. At this rate, he really wouldn't have much time left. She really wanted to find a way, no matter what happened. She remembers Prota saying that resurrection was not impossible. She says in her thoughts that even though she knew it was impossible, somehow she remembered what he said. Why? She says it would be really great if that were totally true. The scene ends up cutting, and the leaves appear in front. The plate asks if it was all because there is no information about his father or mother. The deputy commander asks what he needed that for because he remembers them anyway. Prota asks if he really thought he faked amnesia. He comments that he really lost his memory, so it was only for him to say it straight away. The deputy commander stands there with his head down and comments that when the two were alive, they lived a perfectly normal life. The guy asks if that was all. The guy says yes, that was all. Prota starts looking at him, saying that he didn't look normal. He says that Heron really didn't know how to lie. He wanted to know the relationship between his family members, but somehow it seemed very suspicious. Heron says that more than what they were doing, it was almost time for the banquet and asks if he wasn't ready. He asks if he really needed to go. Proda says that if he did something wrong, everyone could laugh at him. Charlotte even learned the etiquette of the palace so as not to embarrass him. Proda says that he just wanted to enjoy it comfortably there. Heron says that a party and a banquet are different. He comments that the first prince could appear. The guy asks who this guy was. He has never seen him. Heron asks if he hadn't seen the family tree because it was there. He ends up pointing and saying that it was Lewin, his older brother. He is certainly a person he should be more cautious with. At that moment, the first prince says that he heard that Harmon invited the seventh prince. The scene cuts to the banquet, which had many people. One of the guys there says that she had grown up very beautiful. The girl was just watching as he said he was very happy to see her after a long time. This was Alice again. She starts to think that her grandfather asked her not to attend, but she attended anyway. She remembers that he said that the seventh prince would be there, so she wasn't supposed to show up. He didn't want to either. She says that since her grandfather wouldn't show up, she should at least be there. Besides, her grandfather was also taking care of the first prince. Someone calls Miss Alice, and she looks back to see who it was. This was an individual we have seen before. He says that she is still as beautiful as ever, and anyone would believe it even if we told them that she was the reincarnation of the goddess Gaia. The people around him start to say that he is the accountant, and he heard that he has the support of the citizens these days. Alice is just watching people say that it's hard to please lower-class people, and how he doesn't have any power. It seems like his hobby was to do useless volunteer work. He starts fighting with the people while the guy just tells Alice to leave them alone. According to the guy himself, they weren't saying anything wrong. He comments that after his wife died, his only reason for living was his volunteer work, and he didn't think it was very noble. She says it wasn't that. Instead, he really deserved a lot of respect. She starts to think that the accountant was actually a really good guy, and he served in the past. Furthermore, he was the support and helper of the first prince. Instead of coveting his power or something like that, he actually seems to always be concerned about the health of the prince. He was also a person who always speaks for the people. He was a good person. Alice ends up apologizing because she would have to go out and meet and talk to the other people there. The guy says he was anxious about their next date. The girl starts to think that she doesn't feel very well. Someone asks where the seventh prince was and how he could just get out of there. The count says that it had been a long time since he had been to the banquet, and it was better to go talk to people. Alice heartbreakingly asks if he was the archbishop's granddaughter. She introduces herself as Alice and says that it seems like he already knew who she was. The guy says he only saw her from afar, calling her Lady Alice. The guy just looks at the situation from behind, giving a slight smile. His hand was really weird. This guy wants to do bad things, and I already know. Then someone talks about protecting the sacred empire. Prince Alan was entering the room, and Proda arrives next to Charlotte and the vice commander. The guy looks at Proda, and his face changes completely. After a while, Proda was no longer comfortable and said that he was already a prince who did not have the right to inherit the throne and was even exiled. He thought no one would look at him. He wondered why he was attracting so much attention. Charlotte didn't understand the question well. Proda says that she seems a little more noble than him and asks about the classes she took to become a noble. He says it was really worth it. Harmon says that the posture couldn't just be learned in classes. Proda asks what he meant by that. He wonders if he is saying that Proda's stance is bad. The commander says it is obvious that he would never say that. The guy arrives with a sly smile, calling the seventh prince. He says it's been a long time since he saw him. Proda ends up asking who this guy was, and Heron says that Proda's attitude wasn't good. He was acting like a prince and wasn't even being nice. That was the accountant, the guy with red hair. He says it has been a long time since they last saw each other, and it's understandable that he forgot. He ends up putting his hand forward to shake Proda's hand. He says that because he wasn't with him when he was going through a difficult time, he should forgive his rudeness. Proda says he didn't need to. They end up shaking hands while thinking that this was Count Palmer. He used to serve his mother in the past and even supported the first prince. He remembers very well the people who caught him and opens the system window. He gets scared because he sees Count Palmer's age is unknown, and he was a vampire. The characteristic was blood-sucking, dismemberment of the body, black magic, and he was currently very thirsty. He starts thinking that the bastard was a lizard and a vampire. He already thinks that he was the one who killed Prota's mother. They end up shaking hands while the Count asks if he already liked the food at the banquet. Silver, a little nervous, says yes. He was very nervous while he thought he released his holy energy unintentionally, but there was no movement on the vampire's part. The Count says it was a relief. It must have been some time since he last tried royal cuisine. Prota asks since when that guy was in the palace. Silver ends up bowing to the right while. The Count asks if there is a problem. There are a lot of people there, and there is an evil aura in all of them. Several system windows appear in front of Prota. The Count asks where Prota was looking. Prota starts to say that thinking about it, he just remembered something that disappointed him during the meal. He points and asks the waiter that he also wants one of those. He ends up taking it and says it's clear. The alcohol, the vampire, is a little surprised and thinks he was a little scared. He comments that it would be a big disappointment if they left out alcohol during a good meal. Sacred energy begins to surround them while the vampire stares at Prota. He takes advantage and asks why he didn't have a drink. The guy is already in shock, saying that of course he was going to take a sip of that drink. It would be a great pleasure, according to him. He says that it was for drinking. He put his sacred power there and transformed that alcohol into totally sacred power. Prota just wanted the guy to show his true face. He was sure that silhouette was of that guy before. If his real identity is revealed, the perpetrator of the most serious case would naturally be revealed. The guy starts drinking that liquid and says that it seems like he drank it in a hurry. He was already a little drunk. He puts his hand on his head, apologizing to Prota because he was really weak when it comes to alcohol. Prota says no, he didn't seem very drunk. The guy says he wasn't completely drunk yet, but more or less drunk. Then he grabs a bottle of drink and ends up breaking it to use it as a weapon. He points at the vampire and asks what the seventh prince was doing. He simply attacks the vampire, slightly cutting his hand while he is desperate with fear. Everyone asks what the seventh prince was doing. He wonders why it hadn't worked. The guy keeps pretending to be scared, saying for him to calm down. Prota asks why the wound wasn't regenerating. It was very strange. He starts doubting, asking if that guy was a high-level vampire or something like that. The vice commander appears in front, apologizing since the seventh prince got drunk. Prota is defeated, wondering why it didn't work. He ends up telling the Count to go and treat his wound. The Count says yes, he will go quickly and apologizes to the prince. He runs to get treatment. The vice commander asks why Prota did this, and Charlotte wanted to know if he felt something strange. Prota ends up warning them both that the guy was a vampire. They are surprised by this accusation. The vice commander says that they should catch him, but Prota says they didn't have any evidence. He first brings a pen and a piece of paper. The vice commander didn't know why Prota needed it. Prota asks if it isn't obvious. He would simply track down that vampire. After a while, a door closes quickly, and the person who was there was our vampirao. He was feeling sick and ended up vomiting a lot of blood. He was really furious. When he opens his mouth, sacred fire starts coming out. He says it was that damn prince. He was really furious and realizes that Prota definitely knew who he was. It would be impossible for anyone to offer holy water pretending it was alcohol. His body was collapsing. It was holy water, and a lot of blood was coming out. In the midst of his despair, someone appears. It was a girl. She was going to clean the room while the Count says that she could go in. You already know what's going to happen. She's obviously shocked to see all that blood on the floor. That wasn't normal. The Count says that right at the time, he really needed someone like her. After a while, the girls end up entering the place, saying good morning to the count, who was there getting ready.